I am very, very honored and pleased to announce our first keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Martti Nissinen, who is a professor of Assyriology at the University of Helsinki. He specializes in ancient Near Eastern prophecy and gender studies, things like masculinity, homoeroticism, and love poetry. He is the author of Homoeroticism in the Biblical World, and more recently, Ancient Prophecy, Near Eastern Greek, and Biblical Perspectives. He's going to be speaking to us on a wonderful topic, the sexual agency of Ishtar in Akkadian love literature. So, Dr. Nissinen, go ahead. And take off your mute, please.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I would like to thank Stephanie and Caroline most warmly for the invitation. I'm absolutely happy and honored to be part of this wonderful, wonderful conference. By the way, I'm not professor of Assyriology, professor of Old Testament studies, but it doesn't.
Oops. Oh, okay.
Never mind. I am not going to talk about the Old Testament today, but strictly about Assyriology. About Ishtar, who is probably the most famous female divine being, perhaps in the whole ancient world. Let me share my screen to start with. And I am going to start with a quotation from a popular history website that demonstrates what the goddess Ishtar is most famous for even today. Ishtar is widely and quite appropriately known as the goddess of love and war. The textual, pictorial sources associate her with politics, warfare, mythology, royal theology, sex, prophecy, motherhood, economics, almost every aspect of human life and society. Yet what is most often mentioned in the same breath as Ishtar, especially in popularizing contexts, is the sexual act of sacred marriage performed by the king and the high priestess for the sake of fertility. All this has everything to do with our conference, of course, since it is James Frazer's The Golden Bough that laid the foundation of the still popular view on the goddess and her function. In The Golden Bough, Frazer discusses sacred marriage and sacred prostitution globally in the ancient and modern world known to him, Ishtar and Mesopotamian religion occupying but a small component of his grand theory. He concludes that a great Asiatic mother goddess, the personification of all the reproductive energies of nature, was worshipped under different names, but with a substantial similarity of myth and ritual by many peoples of Western Asia. That associated with her was a lover, or rather a series of lovers, divine yet mortal, with whom she mated year by year, their commerce being deemed essential to the propagation of animals and plants, each in their several kind, and further that the fabulous union of the divine pair was simulated and, as it were, multiplied on earth by the real, though temporary, union of the human sexes at the sanctuary of the goddess for the sake of thereby ensuring the fruitfulness of the ground and the increase of man and beast. Even Ishtar was seen as the embodiment of reproductive energies of nature. Frazer mentions her specifically as the spouse of Tammuz, interpreting her descent into the netherworld primarily as a problem for nature's reproduction. Quote, so intimately bound up with the goddess were the sexual functions of the whole animal kingdom that without her presence they could not be discharged. Unquote. The name Ishtar is not mentioned in the chapter concerning the sacred prostitution in the abridged edition of The Golden Bough, but in the full edition, Frazer takes at face value the account of Herodotus on the alleged Babylonian custom of every woman having had to have intercourse with a stranger outside of the sanctuary of Aphrodite, whose Assyrian name, according to Herodotus, was Mylitta, which is the byname of Ishtar. The Frazerian idea of the sacred marriage and prostitution in the service of fertility has, of course, been heavily challenged in the last decades, not the least by Stephanie Boudin, because it has been found to be based on biased interpretation of the sources. Even scholars such as myself, who have not abandoned the idea of hieros gamos, the sacred marriage as such, do not place it in the Frazerian frame of interpretation with fertility and prostitution, whatever is meant with this word, as its essential components. Entirely different frames of interpretation have been developed, for instance, by my teacher Simo Parpola and Pirjo Lapinkivi, who see Ishtar in the epicenter of a spiritual theology instead of the kind of sympathetic magic proposed by Frazer and his aftermath. Nevertheless, Frazer's theory has not been rejected altogether. For instance, Pietro Mander, the Italian Sumerologist, in his brand new book Ishtar la Stella, considers Frazer's interpretation still as valid, although in need of a greater precision. Certamente molte precisazioni sono necessarie, he writes. While we may agree today that Ishtar's roles and functions in Mesopotamian sources extend well beyond producing and guaranteeing fertility, it is important to pay full attention to the goddess's multiple gendered agencies in Mesopotamian texts. She is featured as a lover, mother, daughter, as well as an independent sexual agent who is capable of transgressing gender boundaries. She may even appear in a male guise or behave in a distinctly masculine manner. Thus, there is no reason to downplay her sexual agency, which is much more nuanced and multifaceted than the traditional interpretation based on the Frazerian readings or misreadings of Sumerian sources and Herodotus. So this paper of mine examines Ishtar's sexual agency in less well-known Akkadian love poems and incantations, a major part of which have been edited only recently and therefore not thoroughly analyzed so far. In this literature, the goddess features not only as a sexual agent, but even as a matchmaker and guardian of human love and lovemaking. First, I'm going to provide a quick overview of Ishtar's different gender roles and positions in the Akkadian love literature. Let us begin with Ishtar appearing as the female party in a love relationship. As the Akkadian love literature is deeply rooted in the Sumerian tradition of love poetry, which is essentially about the love of Inanna, that is Ishtar's Sumerian name, and Dumuzi, which is the same as Tammuz. It is not surprising to find Ishtar as the lover of Dumuzi, yearning and searching for him. Ishtar features prominently in the Middle Assyrian catalogue of love songs, several of which seem to be spoken by the goddess calling her beloved shepherd, the most common metaphor used of Dumuzi. Shepherd, hang on, let us make love together. Come in, shepherd, Ishtar's lover, and so on. The name of Ishtar appears only once in the list that you are seeing on the screen, but the way the incipits are grouped in the carefully designed composition leave no doubt that she is the one addressing the man she calls shepherd. These lines only give the first words of the lyrics, the content of which is otherwise unknown, with one exception, just a second, but they alone give a vivid image of the goddess's sexual agency. She wants to make love and takes the initiative. She praises her beloved and flirts with him. She wishes to be taken to the house of love or tavern that in the Frazerian pattern would immediately be associated with the notorious cradle of prostitution, but which may rather be compared with the house of wine mentioned in the biblical Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 4. One of the poems listed in the Middle Assyrian catalogue is known in its entirety. Come in, shepherd, Ishtar's lover is a third-person poetic account of Ishtar, who wants her lover Dumuzi to enter the house of her father and her mother Ningal, who would treat him as a guest of honor. At your coming, may the bolts cheer over you, may the door open by itself for you. Dumuzi, the shepherd, however, is busy elsewhere. He is going to and fro while worrying about his dogs and shepherds. Ishtar does not succeed in persuading him to leave his business and come to the banquet organized by her parents, so she goes herself to Dumuzi's sheepfold, saying, "How fresh is the water of your sheepfold. Your water is burbling, the water of the cattle pen." So Ishtar chooses the stink of the cattle pen instead of the sweet confection of her mother, because she wants to be where her lover is, in spite of his rather impolite ignoring of the high prestige invitation. After all, the man demonstrates his reliability by taking care of his flocks, hence performing a quite respectable male role. In another poem, Ishtar is looking for Dumuzi everywhere. My shepherd, she seeks, my shepherd. Dumuzi is looking for a pasture for his flocks, where grass veils itself with pomegranates, where the red flower blossoms for him on the top of the tree. While his eyes are scanning the landscape, seeking water sources in the steppe and the mountain forests, Ishtar finds him, and the two find themselves in a hut that becomes a scene of love, an abundant pasture with juniper. Ishtar is the main actor of this poem, having all the initiative. Dumuzi is again occupied with his flocks, but Ishtar leads him to somewhere where the business turns into pleasure. A drastically different text is the so-called Divine Love Lyrics published by W.G. Lambert in 1975, and this is now eventually soon to be replaced by the new edition of Rocio da Riva and Nathan Wasserman. This text, represented by a large number of copies from the 6th through the 2nd centuries BCE, is a highly interesting and enigmatic combination of a ritual tablet and a poetic composition that seems to be all about a divine triangle drama between Marduk, the main deity of Babylonia, his spouse Zarpanitu, and his lover Ishtar. Very much is unclear in this composition, including the actual purpose of the ritual, introduced as a ritual of lament, or ritual of Zarpanitu, games of Marduk. What is evident is the jealousy and hostility of Zarpanitu, Marduk's wife, to Ishtar of Babylon, who seems to be making love to Marduk on the roof, and whom she wants to fall from the roof onto a dagger. Marduk, on the other hand, is overwhelmed by the beauty of Ishtar, whose genitals he wants to approach in various ways. Into your genitals in which you trust, I will make a dog enter and will tie shut the door, etc. Many times it is difficult to say who is talking, but it seems like the female voice usually belongs to Zarpanitu, while Ishtar is mostly left without a voice of her own. She is called mother by Marduk, who is praising her beauty, but there is nothing motherly in anything that is said about her. She may be describing herself in a style that resembles of the so-called wasp poems, that is like describing the beloved by body members in other Akkadian poems and even the Song of Songs. And she is most probably the one who says that her boyfriend scares her. The image of Ishtar remains quite as fragmentary as the whole composition, but her role as the paramour of Marduk and the target of other goddesses' anger is quite unique and places her in a position totally different from any other text in the Akkadian corpus of love literature. Such a passive agency as a second-ranking woman and supporting character is extremely atypical of Ishtar, who normally is to be found as the queen of the scene. The two female deities who are more closely than other Mesopotamian goddesses associated with human kings and kingship are Nanaya in the Babylonian sources from the 2nd millennium BCE and Ishtar in the 1st millennium sources from Assyria. This is not the place to discuss to what extent Ishtar and Nanaya were perceived as distinct divine personalities, but I would like to include Nanaya in our discussion because in love literature, the roles and functions of Ishtar and Nanaya are generally exchangeable, which makes the images of these two goddesses of love merge together virtually. Only Nanaya, however, plays the role of the lover of the human king in Akkadian love poems. An old Babylonian text refers to the female, an old Babylonian text is associated with the New Year ritual involving the king, and some female participants, pregnant women and wise women are mentioned in the text. The female voice dominates the scene, interrupted occasionally by the male speaker and a chorus. The female speaker is deeply in love and expresses her desire for the man, despite the warnings of the chorus, do not trust him, do not put your confidence in him. Encouraged by the man who says, would you be my one and only, conquer what is mine and of my love, rejoice Queen Nanaya. She wants to be embraced by him. Come to me, I want to be embraced the way that my heart told me. Let us do the work of lovers all night long. Let us not sleep, but squeeze ourselves with laughter in the bed. The poetic language is essentially about the woman's desire and even her fear of being rejected towards the end of the poem. She is aware and open about her desire, but at the same time it is important to her to be recognized by the man, without whose appreciation her desire cannot be fulfilled. This is interesting if the male protagonist is really Nissinen, the king of Babylonia. This is not absolutely certain, since the poem, in the words of Nathan Wasserman, lacks cohesion and does not read as a homogeneous composition. But it is nevertheless important that the king is presented as the actual beneficiary of the ritual with which at least some verses of the poem are associated. Verily, in the month of Nissinen, we are the ones who always bless him, the ones who sing praise like in ancient times when he appears. Endless days, everlasting life, and joy and heart is carried to Nissinen, our son. For the new year, he poured wine for her, dripping it with his right hand. These prosaic lines serve as a cultic commentary and, at least in my reading, suggest that it is the divine royal couple whose love the poem celebrates, in however disconnected fashion. The language of love poetry has a ritual counterpart in the blessing of the king who libates wine for the goddess. Even Ishtar herself is mentioned in love poems concerning the king, although in a different way. In a fragmentary poem classified as an irtum, that is a genre rest song of a group of love songs, a female speaker is longing for her beloved of the steppe. The speaker's name is not preserved in the fragment available to us, but the concluding passage of the poetic composition strongly suggests that she is no one else than Ishtar. Oracles of your well-being and everlasting life may Ishtar give to Ammiditana. Her life is always new. May the beloved be in your heart, cherish her tenderly. This not only suggests that Ishtar was the oracular goddess whose words were transmitted to Ammiditana, the king of Babylonia, in the 17th century, but she is even introduced as his beloved, engaged in a similar kind of royal divine relationship as Nissinen with Nanaya in the previous text. A different way of introducing the king into a love poem can be found in the poem of Ishtar and Dumuzi we have quoted already. The poem ends with the reference to a ritual with several participants, the king being the foremost of them. The fragmentary lines on the screen speak about a group of people that is addressed, and then she accepted the hand lifting of Shalmaneser. She gave him what he asked for. She sang the song, which is all mine. King Shalmaneser I, 13th century BCE, does not appear as a participant, but rather as the beneficiary of the love of the divine couple. The love poem ends with the prayer, which may strike the modern reader as strange, but it tells a whole lot about the use and function of love poetry. The love scene of Ishtar and Dumuzi is presented as a prelude to the king's prayer, which, on the other hand, can be understood as a response to the love poem. The king's welfare and the protection of the people derive from the divine love in which Ishtar herself participates, rejoicing in the presence of the king and the congregation and accepting the king's prayer. In love poems involving the king in one way or another, Ishtar and Nanaya are presented simultaneously as women in love and divine guarantors of the king's rule and people's welfare. Such a combination of sexual and political agency gives the goddess not only the role of the lovesick woman, desiring the male partner and dependent on his recognition, but also that of the provider and benefactor, which give her authority over the king and makes him dependent on the divine favors. Ishtar is sometimes mentioned in love incantations, the purpose of which is to improve the love life of the person on whose behalf the incantation is recited. In an old Akkadian incantation, one of the earliest literary texts in Akkadian language anyway, a male person attempts to attract the attention of the woman with whom he wants to be engaged. The one who recites the incantation conjures her by the name of the goddesses Ishtar and Ishara. Until his neck and your neck are not entwined, you shall not find peace. The magical agent persuading the woman and driving her to ecstasy, anamuhutim, is iremum, the love charm. This quasi-personified factor is loved by Enki, the favorite god of exorcists, and it or he is presented as the son of Ishtar, sitting in her lap. In another incantation, the love charm is addressed directly. Love charm, love charm. His two horns are gold, his tail is pure lapis lazuli, placed in the heart of Ishtar. In these incantations, Ishtar is not presumed to act directly, but she is nevertheless presented as the mother of the love charm, and thus the source and the generator of the power that may change the love life of any human being. Even in the love poems, Ishtar is sometimes recognized as the matchmaker who creates or restores love relationships. In one poem, a male person suffers from the absence of his faraway beloved, whose charm is a love that plagues. He cannot get enough of repeating her name, and he is upset for not being with her. All of a sudden, the text says, was it not Ishtar who took care of the affair? The lovers had never seen each other. It turns out that the male speaker was actually dreaming, and that the dream had a happy end. He awakes at the noise of swallows and says, the love charm returned into my mind. Again, the irimum, the love charm, is acting as Ishtar's agent, producing an experience for a human being of being loved, if only in a dream. Both Ishtar and Nanaya are invoked by a woman who tries to win the heart of her reluctant and averse ex-beloved in a dialogue in which the yearning verses of the woman alternate with the depreciative, even offensive lines of the man. The woman does not give up, since she knows where the help can be sought from. May my faithfulness prevail in front of Ishtar the queen. May my love triumph, may my slanderer come to shame. To revere and to charm you, constantly attending my beloved, I have concerned myself with at the command of Nanaya. For the woman, the goddess, the two goddesses really merge here into one, is not only the patroness, but even the source and mover of her feelings. The goddess gives her faith and encourages, even commands her to revere and charm the male beloved. She keeps praying Nanaya to be rewarded with his acceptance, which makes her look less than independent in the relationship she is envisioning. The poem takes a new turn when the woman starts talking about another woman. May Queen Ishtar strike with confusion the one who does not love you. May she, like me, be afflicted with sleeplessness. May she be dazed and anxious all night long. Most probably the one female one who does not love you is someone whom the woman perceives as her rival, and whom she wants to suffer the same way as she does herself. Even the man hints at her presence, referring to those who keep telling you, you are not the one and only, and swearing that he has taken the mandrake thousands of miles away from the female speaker. However, the woman's resilience is rewarded and her prayers are heard. The man who first speaks bad words about her eventually realizes that she doesn't look that bad at all, and recalls the time when she leaned her head against him. Of the rivaling woman, he says, by Ishtar, the other woman shall be our misfortune. So the goddess has again saved one relationship. But one poem seems to be all about breaking the relationship of a couple. The text is rather unique combination of praise and incantation, beginning with the words referring to Ishtar, she is the woman. She is the woman, if we prefer. and continuing as follows: may they not talk kindly with each other, may they not spend the night kissing each other, may they not disclose to each other whatever is pure in their hearts. This can only be understood as a wish of a jealous person to destroy the relationship of the partners by way of disturbing their intimate communication, talking, kissing, and sincere sharing of their deepest thoughts. The rest of the poem is a praise of Ishtar, lacking any further expressions of jealousy. The role of the goddess is twofold. She is the lady of true ordinances with the superior authority in the divine world, an authority that enables divine agency even in personal, intimate matters of human beings, who can turn to her in full confidence that the goddess has the direct access to their love life, not only as a matchmaker, but even as a separator. Probably the most active sexual agency in Akkadian love poetry is ascribed to Ishtar in a Middle Babylonian text classified by the colophon as a barum, praise of Ishtar. The 20 lines long poem begins and ends with the refrain, celebration is a foundation for the city, and this refrain is repeated on every line. This gives the impression that the poem belongs to an urban festival, the nature of which is unknown and probably cannot be concluded on the basis of this text alone. The first lines of the poem address kulmashitu, young men and young women, which may imply that the celebration takes place in the temple of Ishtar, where the kulmashitu is working. If you look at the dictionaries, you find very often prostitutes or the like as the translation of kulmashitu, but let's forget that for a while. The rest of the poem is a rather graphic description of how two men make a sexually explicit suggestion to Ishtar, who, while consenting to the suggestion, invites even more men to gather around her. One came to her saying, "Come, yield to me." The second came to her saying, "Come, let me pet your vagina. After I have yielded to you, gather around me the young men of your town," says Ishtar. Ishtar invites the crowd of young men to join her at the shadow of the wall, where 7 from in front of her, 7 from behind of her, 60 and 60 relieve themselves in her vagina. This brings the men to complete exhaustion, but not the goddess, whose energy has no limits. The young men got tired. Ishtar did not get tired. On the contrary, she urges them to place it to her lovely vagina, and the young men cannot but listen and yield to her order. This text, without doubt, feeds the post-Frazerian imagination around what is called prostitution, as well Ishtar herself as a prostitute, a role that is often attached to her divine profile. The prostitution language, however, is loaded with problems. First, the term is used of almost any female, sometimes even male, sexual activity that happens outside the conventional patriarchal matrimonial pattern. Second, because of this, the use of the term is insensitive towards the socio-sexual roles of the partners of a sexual encounter, usually not differentiating between commercial and non-commercial activity. Third, it is used in an emotional and objective manner that tends to demean sex workers, whether one is accused of prostitution or defended against such allegations. What happens in our poem is prostitution if we say so, but we should note that no commercial transaction is imagined taking place, neither is the scene associated with cultic prostitution in any way, unless we place the whole scenery in the post-Frazerian framework. What is clear is that the goddess assumes a super-dominant sexual role. Her sexual performance tires the young men who first tell her to yield to them, demonstrating their hegemonic masculinity, but at the end of the day, they have to yield to the order of Ishtar, whose sexual agency is active, dominant, and blatantly masculine. The figure of Ishtar here is a rare combination of sexual initiative with female gender and masculine authority. The text, of course, can be read from multiple perspectives. The shadow of the wall is a blended metaphor that probably intentionally leads the thoughts to shady sexual encounters outside the city, but the wall is also a symbol of the goddess, indicating her liminality, strength, and protection. Hence, the wall becomes the place where the goddess can be met in her several aspects. As the poem is designated as a parum, a praise, it is presented by the library keeper who wrote the colophon as a praise of the goddess, the purpose of which is hardly to present her in a bad light. This does not mean the poem could not be read as a carnivalist reversal of conventional gender hierarchy, perhaps somehow reflecting the festival it belongs to. We can nevertheless ask whose voice is represented by the text. A feminist reading would perhaps identify Ishtar as an empowering figure who ridicules the hegemonic male authority. But if we read the text as a male fantasy, it may be found expressing the male audience's wish for an insatiable woman, even satisfying male sadomasochist needs. I have really no time to discuss properly the aspect of praise here, but I cut here a little bit, just saying that elements of praise and worship of Ishtar and Nanaya can be found in many, many love poems. In addition, a significant number of incipits listed in the Middle Assyrian catalogue of songs are nothing but praise, which has raised question whether all the poems in the catalogue are really love poems but belong to a different genre. In the absence of the rest of the lyrics following the incipits, it is impossible to know what the hundreds of songs might have included, but it is important to note that praise of deities, Ishtar and Nanaya in particular, is part of the poetic expression of Akkadian love literature and should not be seen as a secondary element alien to the otherwise secular poetry. The prominent featuring of Ishtar and other deities in love poems demonstrates how tightly the human and divine worlds bond together in their audience's symbolic world. And now I'm coming to my last chapter. In the wake of James Frazer's influential theories of sacred marriage and sacred prostitution, the distinctly sexual agency of the goddess Ishtar has been both overemphasized and misdirected. Nevertheless, her involvement in sexual activities and her different roles in the love life of both people and of her own are prominent issues in Mesopotamian texts and can be studied independently from the Frazerian framework. The Akkadian love literature, demonstrably belonging to the same poetic mythological tradition with the Sumerian Dumuzi Inanna poetry, yields a vivid and manifold image of Ishtar's sexual agency, as we have seen. First of all, she is the woman. As in the Sumerian poetry, Ishtar is presented as a woman who is passionately in love with her shepherd, feeling pain and joy, yearning and fulfillment, desire and satisfaction. She wants to make love to her beloved and is ready to take the initiative and make an effort to reach her goal. The range of Ishtar's emotions is that of a woman in love and as such profoundly human. Her active female role may not correspond to patriarchal ideals of a submissive woman, but finds a counterpart in the woman of the Song of Songs in the Hebrew Bible, perhaps even in the real life of the audience for whom the figure of Ishtar in love may have given the opportunity to identify with. Second, Ishtar is definitely the supreme goddess of love. She is the one to whom people, especially women, but even men, can turn in their love issues, and by whom people swear when they want something to be true in their love life. Ishtar's own love life indicates that she understands human concerns, which makes her the foremost guardian of human love and lovemaking. She is in charge of love charm, her son, who sits in her lap. As the goddess with superior authority, she is able to interfere human love affairs, either as a matchmaker or as a separator, and she deserves to be greatly praised for her divine qualities so beneficial for humans. Thirdly, Ishtar is a liminal figure who is able to reverse gender hierarchies. She is remarkably active even in traditional female roles, but she may also combine sexual initiative with female gender and masculine authority, performing a sexual role that would rather conform to hegemonic masculinity. A passive, in this sense, feminine role is assumed by Ishtar only in the triangle drama between Zarpanitu, Marduk, and herself. And fourthly, sacred marriage is not merely Frazerian fantasy. It actually took place, not only by poetic means, but even as a royal ritual. Such rituals may provide the Sitz im Leben for some Akkadian love poems celebrating the love between deities, often with the king being somehow involved in their relationship. However, the Frazerian interpretation of the idea and practice of sacred marriage is not supported by the sources, whether love poems or other texts. The main constituents of the Frazerian theory, ritual sex and cultic prostitution, as well as any reference to fertility, be it human offspring or agricultural fecundity, are all but missing from the image of Ishtar in love poetry. Thank you very much for your patience.